Hello, this is Daniel from soundheadquarters.com. In today's video, I'm going to show you how we take the client space from this to this by building and installing these acoustic panels with wooden frames. We're going to go through the panel process, the upholstery, and building the wooden frame that goes around them, as well as the installation on site at the client's location. Let's get right into it. So we're starting off with our 2x2x8 lumber. This lumber is going to make the frames for these acoustic panels. So I'm going ahead and getting all of my cuts marked out. Our long pieces of wood I'm cutting to 48 inches, and our short pieces I'm cutting to 22.5 inches. That is because once we add our wooden frame around the outside, that's going to add 1.5 inches to the final exterior dimension, giving us a 24-inch or 2-foot wide acoustic panel when it's all finished and going to be installed on site. So I'm going to show you now how I screw these pieces together. I use two 3-inch construction screws at each corner, and I use the floor as a guide, and that is because we are going to run this acoustic panel frame on the router to give it a nice 45-degree bevel, and I want to make sure that my screws are closer to the rear side of the acoustic panel frame so that they don't come close or touch the router blade. So I'm just going ahead and doing 2 screws per corner all the way around, using the floor as a guide for my drill to make sure that I keep those screws nice and close to me. The floor being the front face side of the acoustic panel frame, and the side that's facing me being the rear side of the acoustic panel frame. So here is the router table. You can see I have my chamfer bit mounted on there, and this is what's going to give the acoustic panel that nice 45-degree beveled edge. This is purely an aesthetic step. It's not necessary at all to the function of the panel. It's just something I like to do to give it a nice professional look. And it's going to look really nice, especially with the wooden frames after, which you'll see in a little bit here. So I like to do 2 passes. You can see that nice chamfered edge that adds onto the acoustic frame there. I like to do 2 passes for each length. The first pass gets rid of the bulk of the material, and the second pass just makes sure that we have a nice clean cut. And I always check all of my cuts. And then I just go ahead and just give it a light sanding. This is just to make sure that there's no burrs or anything that's going to catch on the upholstery when we stretch the fabric around these frames. So I'm just going around the panel, giving it a light sanding, making sure that everything is all nice and smooth before we can go ahead and get started with the insulating and upholstery process. So I'm using my pneumatic stapler here and just using regular T50 staples. And we're going to go ahead and get the back fabric on these panels first. And this is just a standard black polyester, no special fabric here. Just getting them cut to size, and then I can staple them into the rear side of the frame. So just going around the frame, giving equal tension. I like to get all 4 corners stapled in first. Then I go around the long sides and get the short sides as well. And just making sure that it doesn't need to be super, super tight, but I want to make sure that there's no wrinkles or anything. Now we're going ahead and getting the front fabric cut, and I need to make sure that I account for that length of fabric to wrap around to the rear side of the frame. This is the acoustic insulation that we're using for this particular build. This is Rockwool Comfort Board 80, and it is 1.5 inches thick, which works out perfect for our 2x2 wood, which the real measurement of the 2x2 is 1.5 inches, so it works out perfect. So we're just getting that insulation cut to size and just press fit into our frames here, making sure that that insulation is not poking out past the frame and going to bulge into our front fabric. So I lay out that front fabric face down, lay the insulated panel down on it, and then I can get started on the upholstery process. So same thing as the rear fabric, I like to get all 4 corners taut and stapled first. That kind of orients the fabric nicely so it lays nice and flat. And I do the long sides first and then the short sides. You can see here's the close-up detail on how I lay down those corners. I like to just fold them in nice and neatly to make sure that there's no weird bulges, and everything from the front side face of the panel looks nice and neat and lays flat along all of the beveled edges around our acoustic panel. And I have a ton of videos on my channel of panel upholstery if you'd like to see more, but that is how we went about it. And there are the finished panels. So we have 5 standard size panels and 1 just smaller custom size to fit underneath a picture frame that the client had in his space. Here is the wood that we are using to create the frames that are going to go around these acoustic panels. And this is 1x2x8 basswood. And I'm just getting them cut to size, and these are just going to simply fit right around those frames, making sure that I got my measurements exact so that it's a nice snug fit. And I'm just using my 16 gauge finish nailer to nail these together. I'm just doing 2 nails per corner. And once I get that nailed together, I can just do a quick test fit here, and you can see that that wooden frame just fits nicely right around that acoustic panel. And just making sure that my measurements are correct, that it's going to be a nice snug fit before I go ahead and build all the rest of the frames. And you can see with that beveled edge and the wooden frame, it's just a nice professional finished look. The client wanted to have kind of that vintage acoustic panel feel for his studio. So this is the route that we went. So once I had all those frames built, I'm just going to go ahead and wood fill my nail holes. Then I can go ahead and sand them down, and then these frames will be ready for finish. So it's just as simple as applying the wood filler with your finger or with a small tool and just sanding them flat, getting rid of all that extra wood filler so that only the nail holes are filled. Then we can go ahead and get ready for the finish. This client requested a whitewash, so this is just half white paint, half water, and I'm just applying it on with a brush, and then I'm wiping off the excess with a rag. And this gives it like a semi-translucent white kind of finish on these acoustic panel frames. So here is the client's studio space. This is where we will be installing these acoustic panels. And we're just going to go ahead and start with the small custom sized panel that's fitting right underneath this picture frame here. And our standard installation process in a drywall wall is we measure everything out. We go ahead and we use our metal cleat and we pencil out where our holes need to be drilled. Then I can drill them out, and then we can install the drywall anchors. I like to use the steel threaded drywall anchors. I've also used the plastic hammer-in anchors in the past. It's all up to personal preference with your anchor choice. And once we screw that cleat in with those anchors, then we can just hang the panel with the cleat installed on the rear side of the panel as well. So now we're going to go ahead and get the rest of the panels mounted around the room. You can see I set up my laser level there just to make sure that we have a nice consistent height all the way around the room. And the client requested that the panel height matches the height of that picture frame that's on his rear wall there. So that's what we did. We set up the laser 3 inches below the top of that picture frame because that is where the particular cleats that we are using matches up to the rear side of the panel. And once we hang our panel, then we just placed that wooden frame right on top. And what I'm doing right now is I'm going around with my 18 gauge finish nailer, and I'm just nailing in that wooden frame into the panels, making sure that the gaps are nice and consistent all the way around the panels, just to make sure that those wooden frames are secure and they're not going to rattle while the client's working on music. And so that when he takes these panels on and off the wall, that frame is all one solid piece integrated into the panel. Here is some finished shots of how they turned out and the finished room. There's also a large floor standing panel or gobo, whatever you like to call it, that I built on wheels. That's going to be coming out in the next video. So enjoy these last few quick beauty shots of the finished room. And thank you so much for watching. This has been Daniel from soundheadquarters.com. Stay tuned for lots more studio building content. I really appreciate everyone watching. Thanks. Peace out.